There's a subtle behavior, so quiet, so well-dressed, that most people never notice it. But it destroys relationships. It blocks love, and it silently kills influence. I'm not talking about shouting, manipulation, or arrogance. I'm talking about something much colder, much more disguised. The quiet mask of judgment, worn in the name of honesty. Maybe no one told you this, but not every truth needs to be spoken, and not every honest opinion is rooted in love. I've seen people, good people, who pride themselves on being straightforward. "I just tell it like it is," they say. But too often, what they're really doing is hiding criticism inside a polite tone. And people feel it. Even when no one says a word, hearts can tell when they're being reduced, analyzed, measured. You see, influence isn't about being right. It's not about having the last word. It's about creating safety, space, and sacred presence. The kind of presence where another human soul can relax its guard, and maybe even open up. If someone walks away from you feeling smaller, even if you said nothing wrong, you've lost more than the argument. You've lost connection. I remember a man who came to one of my lectures many years ago. He was brilliant, well-read, sharp, confident, but no one in his company trusted him. Why? He was honest, brutally so. He pointed out every mistake. He offered feedback before being asked, and he wrapped it all in logic and civility. But the effect? People shrank around him. His presence made others doubt themselves. His truth did not liberate, it wounded. And that's the invisible destroyer I'm talking about. Not hate, not rage, but judgment disguised as sincerity. Correction without compassion. Advice without intimacy. We forget that being influential is not the same as being informative. The greatest leaders, the ones who change lives, not just minds, carry their words like sacred tools. They speak as if the soul of the other person were glass. There's a reason why Jesus said, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." Not because truth doesn't matter, but because the spirit in which truth is delivered matters more. Influence is not about speaking, it's about being. People remember how you made them feel long after they forget what you said. And what they feel, deep down, is your intention. You might be wondering, but what if I see someone doing something wrong? Should I just stay silent? No, but ask yourself this. Am I trying to help them grow, or am I trying to prove I'm right? One comes from humility, the other from ego, and only one of them leads to influence. I've learned that the human heart is more responsive to warmth than to wisdom, and I say that as a man who has studied words his entire life. You can have the finest vocabulary, the sharpest intellect, and still fail to reach another soul. Why? Because presence is felt, not just heard. There's a kind of silence that speaks louder than correction. When someone walks into a room and carries no need to be superior, no rush to be right, others lean in. They don't feel judged, they feel seen. That's the beginning of influence. The invisible behavior that destroys our impact doesn't come from the content of our words, but from the posture of our hearts. I've watched it in small moments: a raised eyebrow, a sigh, a pause laced with subtle condescension. We say nothing harsh, Yet the message is clear. You're not enough. And that message, once felt, makes people retreat. They stop opening up. They stop trusting. They stop listening. Let me tell you about a woman I once met, Clara. She worked in a hospital. Not a doctor, not a nurse, but a janitor. She didn't have fancy titles. She had something rarer: presence. Every morning, she would greet the patients with soft eyes and no agenda. She didn't offer advice. She didn't critique their attitudes. She simply smiled and asked, "How are you holding up today?" One day, a young man recovering from surgery told her, "You're the only one I feel safe around here." Imagine that. Among all the experts, all the authority figures, it was the janitor who carried the influence. Not because she was smarter, but because she never used truth as a weapon. She used stillness as a gift. Influence, my friend, begins where judgment ends. It grows in the soil of curiosity, compassion, and humility. And if you want to be someone others trust, truly trust, you must first learn to withhold the impulse to fix, to correct, to diagnose. Just be there, fully, quietly, sincerely. We often forget, people don't want to be changed. They want to be understood. And once they feel understood, they change themselves. Now here's something to reflect on. When you enter a conversation, do others feel safe to be imperfect around you? Or do they brace themselves for evaluation? You don't have to lower your standards, but you can lower your walls. That's the secret. When I was younger, I believed that being influential meant having the best arguments, the sharpest stories, the most persuasive tone. I'd prepare my speeches with precision. I'd organize every point to perfection. But with time and humility, I discovered something I hadn't expected. The moments that moved people most were never the ones I rehearsed. They were the moments when I stopped trying to teach and simply chose to connect. You see, we confuse performance with power. But true influence doesn't perform. It doesn't posture. It doesn't try to win the room. It walks in with an open heart, not a loaded mind. And I've seen the difference it makes. There's a proverb that says, "A gentle answer turns away wrath." I believe that. Not just in conflict, but in daily life. When someone expects us to strike, and we choose to stay calm, something shifts. It's not weakness, it's strength without noise. That kind of strength is rare, and people remember it forever. I once knew a pastor, quiet man, rarely raised his voice. But when he spoke, entire rooms went still. Not because he was forceful, but because he was sincere. His words were soaked in silence. They came from a place of depth, not demand. I asked him once, "What's your secret?" He smiled and said, "I never speak to prove a point. I speak to protect a soul." That answer changed me. How often do we speak to protect someone's dignity, their vulnerability, their sacred space? The invisible behavior I warned about isn't always loud. It often hides behind smiles, behind feedback, behind spiritual language. But if our intent is to correct rather than connect, to impress rather than embrace, we've already lost our influence. Here's what I know now. The most influential people are those who walk through the world like a quiet prayer.
They enter rooms and ask silently, "How can I serve this moment without ego?" And in doing so, they create miracles, not by changing others, but by making them feel safe enough to change themselves. So if there's someone in your life right now you want to reach, don't try to convince them. Become the kind of presence they want to be around. Let your calmness be louder than your words. Let your love be quieter than your opinions. And let your example speak long after your mouth is closed.
I want to tell you something I wish someone had told me sooner. Not every battle is worth your insight. Not every moment calls for a response. Sometimes the most powerful act of influence is restraint. Have you ever watched a tree during a storm? It doesn't fight the wind. It doesn't shout back at the rain. It just stands, rooted, silent, unshaken. That's the kind of presence that transforms lives, not through force, but through faith. The people we remember most are rarely the loudest. They're the ones who made us feel seen when we felt invisible. The ones who didn't flinch when we were falling apart. The ones who offered their listening instead of their lectures. Think of Jesus with the woman caught in adultery. Surrounded by voices ready to condemn, he bent down and wrote in the sand. No dramatic speech, no angry defense, just presence, silence, and then mercy. That story has echoed for centuries, not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. That's influence. So I invite you to pause and reflect. In your own life, are you creating that kind of space for others? Or are you unknowingly closing the door with well-meaning truth? If you truly want to be a force of change, you must begin by honoring where people are, not where you think they should be. Influence is not about lifting others to your level. It's about stepping into their shoes and staying long enough for trust to grow. And sometimes that means listening more than you speak. Letting others be messy in front of you without trying to tidy them up. Trusting that silence can be more healing than sermons. I know, it's not easy. We've been conditioned to fix, to advise, to improve. But maybe today you can choose something braver. Maybe you can offer someone the sacred gift of acceptance. No commentary, no critique, just presence. Because here's the truth. People don't change because we pointed out their flaws. They change because they felt loved despite them. That's the influence that lasts. As I close this message, I want to return to you, not as a teacher, but as a fellow traveler. I know what it feels like to want to be heard, to want to make a difference, to want your words to matter. But true influence, soulful, lasting influence, doesn't come from the tongue. It comes from the life behind it. And that life must be anchored in something deeper than opinion. It must be grounded in stillness, humility, and sacred self-awareness. Otherwise, our influence becomes noise, even when we speak truth. You don't have to speak less. You just have to speak from a deeper place, a place where your heart has first been quieted, so that your words can carry peace. I think about that often. What kind of legacy are we leaving, not through grand gestures, but through ordinary presence? When people recall your name, will they remember someone who made them feel small, or someone who made them feel safe? You don't need to be perfect to be powerful. You don't need to agree with everyone to be kind. You just need to carry yourself as someone who respects the fragility of another person's soul. So today I challenge you, not loudly, but gently. Watch yourself. Watch not just what you say, but how you show up. The slight shift of your energy, the breath before your response, the sacred pause where empathy could live. If you feel the need to correct someone, wait. Ask first, is this love speaking or my pride? If you feel the need to be heard, breathe. Ask, is this urgency coming from truth or from fear of being unseen? In every interaction, you have a choice: to defend your ego or to protect someone's dignity. Choose the latter every time. And if no one ever told you this before, let me be the first. Your influence is not built by force. It is built in stillness, in self-discipline, in the quiet courage to withhold judgment and offer grace instead. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room to be remembered. You just have to be the safest. That is how you become truly influential. That is how you become unforgettable.